Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Good morning.
Good morning. And hi, Sonia and Manfred. I saw you last night at Rabbi Goldberg's class.
Okay. All right. We're ready to get started. If anybody wants to, by the way, just a reminder, if anybody wants to chime in at any point, please do not hesitate to unmute yourselves, raise your hand, shout out, whatever you need to do to get my attention.
There's no sound. You're muted.
I'm muted. Huh.
He's not muted for me, so check your settings.
Oh, maybe check your settings. All right. I think I'm okay on my end.
You're not muted, not on me and not here.
All right, great. Thank you. Okie dokie. All right, so we'll get started, and we are studying Parshas Mishpatim. We are We are continuing Matan Torah, which began in Parshas Yisro. The revelation at Sinai is now continuing. That Vav that begins Parshas Mishpatim is so critical. Ve'ela hamishpatim. Ve'ela means and these. This is a continuation of the revelation, the giving of the Torah that began previously with the Aseret Hadibros. We're continuing now, and so obviously it's noteworthy to look at
About
what.
you.
I'm sorry. Anyways, it's noteworthy to see what exactly the Torah chooses to begin with as it continues into what I would call like the second chapter of the revelation at Sinai, Parshas Mishpatim. The fact that it would start with Eved Ivri is certainly noteworthy. Ve'ela mishpatim asher tasim lifnehem. These are the mishpatim. These are the laws that you, Moshe, shall place before them. Ki sikne Eved Ivri. When you acquire a Hebrew servant or slave, sheish shanim ya'avod uvashvi'i yetzei lachofshi chinam. He shall work for 6 years and he shall go free in the seventh year. Now, one question that can be asked is, what we've already been asking, what I said was noteworthy is that the Torah chooses to begin these Mishpatim with Eved Ivri. And many commentaries ask, why? Why do we begin this discussion with Eved Ivri, with the Hebrew servant? Strengthening that question is the idea that Hashem just took the Jewish people out of slavery. They were just redeemed from slavery. Why would slavery be front and center? And why would the Torah even perpetuate this concept of slavery? Slavery is a bad thing. Slavery is something under which the Jewish people suffered. So why would the Torah place slavery front and center in its discussion of laws upon which society is built? You could ask the question from a more moral perspective, namely, why should the Torah even tolerate the concept of slavery? If it's something that we suffered from so intensely, then why not eradicate it completely? Why not completely forbid it? So we have two questions here, basically. Number one, why begin with slavery, and why tolerate slavery at all? So that's what I'd like to tackle today, and I think even the moral question of why even tolerate slavery is one that can be answered from the text itself, as opposed to just a philosophical discussion. Because if we look at the way that Parshas Mishpatim is constructed, I think we can find some important values that the Torah is trying to convey in this presentation of Parshas Mishpatim, and the laws of Eved Ivri in particular. So what do I mean? So there are a number of contemporary scholars who all note that there seems to be a particular structure to Parshas Mishpatim, which is no small task to identify a structure within Parshas Mishpatim, because it seems to be a random assortment of mitzvos. Obviously, there are lots of mitzvos that have to deal with damages and property. So there definitely seems to be a general theme that's easy to identify. But when you go through the different mitzvos, you go through the different details, you quickly see that there's a lot of very different mitzvos within that theme. And the question is there any sort of order to it? Is there a reason why they're presented in this order? The Rishonim discuss this. The Ramban suggests a certain order to the mitzvos. The Barbanel argues and rejects that and says that there really is no order, or at least not one that we can discern. But there are some contemporary scholars, Rabbi Elchanan Samit, chiefly among them, that do identify some element of structure to Parshas Mishpatim, and it's really very interesting. And I want to take you through it. It's a little bit detailed, but I think it's certainly worthwhile. So if you have a Chumash in front of you, if it's a Steinsaltz Chumash, it is 403. And if it is a ArtScroll Chumash, it's page 416. Ve'ila HaMishpatim. So I'd like to go swiftly through the most of the Parsha, not the whole Parsha, in order to show you the different topics. So we began reading with Perek Aleph, Pasuk Aleph and Beis about the Eved Ivri. If we turn the page and go to the next topic, we see that the Eved concept is continued. V'chim kor ish es bito le'ama. If a man sells his daughter to be a maidservant, that's in Pasuk Zayin. And then in Pasuk Yud Beis, we have the next mitzvah, which is Makei ish v'meis mos yumas. If a person strikes another person and he dies as a result of that strike, that person shall be put to death. That's the punishment for killing someone else. And then the next topic, Pasuk Yudaled, V'chi yazid ish al re'ehu lehargo be'arma me'im mizbechi tikachenu lamus. If a man shall act intentionally against his neighbor to kill him cunningly, you shall take him even from my altar to die. So we still continue the topic of someone striking another person. Pasuk tesvav umakei aviv v'imo mos yumas. Somebody who strikes their father or mother, even if the person doesn't die, even if they don't kill them, that's also a capital punishment. V'gonev ish u'micharo v'nimtza biyado mos yumas. If a person kidnaps another person, they are liable to death. U'mikalel aviv v'imo mos yumas. Somebody who curses one of their parents, that is a capital crime. Pasuk Yud Ches v'chi yirivun anashim. If two men are fighting, v'hika ish esrei ehu, and one strikes another, then these are the different kinds of damages that must be paid. V'chiyakeh ish es avdo. If a person strikes his servant, o es amaso, or their maidservant. So everything we've read until now, it's easy to see, focuses on interpersonal damages. That's probably not the most elegant way of putting that, right? It's when one person causes harm to another. In most cases, it's bodily harm, but we also saw the child cursing their parents. But it's one person harming another person. That seems to be the common thread that goes through all of these mitzvos. Pasuk Chav Beis, verse 22. If men are fighting and they strike a woman who is pregnant and she miscarries, then that's then it goes through the damages in that case. And then we get to ayin tachas ayin, shein tachas shein, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. And then pasuk Chavav, v'chiyakeh ish es ein avdo, o es ein amoso v'shichasa. If a person strikes the eye of their servant or their maidservant, that servant goes free. So again, we continue seeing all these laws about a person who is injured by another person. Now watch what happens in Pasuk Chavches, and let's see if the topic changes and how it changes. Pasuk Chavches, v'chiyigach shor es ish o es isha v'meis. If somebody's ox should gore a man or a woman and that person dies, sakol yisakel hashor, so the ox should be stoned, and the owner of the ox is free from any capital punishment. V'im shor nagachu mitmol shol, but if this is an ox that is prone to goring, then that is a capital crime. And then you go to the next topic, Pasuk Lamed Gimel. Actually, I'm sorry, don't go to the next topic. No, let's stop here for a second. Go to Pasuk Lamed Beis before the next topic. If a servant is gored and is injured, then there should be a certain monetary punishment for that as well. Okay. Now, the fact that it switched from people injuring each other to property injuring another person is what I think is what confused certain people to think that maybe there was a topic switch. It almost even confused me. But what Rabbi Elchanan Samet notes is that even with the change from a person injuring to another person to property injuring another person, right? Nevertheless, there's still a common theme, and that is that the Torah is grouping these mitzvos based on who the victim is. These are all situations in which a person suffers some injury. At first, it's a person suffers injury from another person, and then it is a person who suffers injury from someone's property. For instance, their animal. So up until Pasuk Lamed Beis, this entire group can be classified as who is injured. Who is injured? A person is injured. Okay. Step number one. Step number two, starting from Pasuk Lamed Gimel. If you take a look, if you look at the psukim now through the lens which I just gave you of who is the damaged party, who's the victim, we now see the transition to the next topic. Because what happens in Pasuk Lamed Gimel, v'chi yiftach ish bor o ki yichre ish bor v'lo yichasenu, if a person digs a pit and does not cover it, v'nafal shama shor o chamor, now an ox or a donkey falls into the pit, bal habor yishalem keser zilavo v'ames yelo. V'chi yigof shor ish es shor re'ehu v'ames. If a person's ox gores another person's ox, then this is what should be done. So now we see who is the damaged party now, not a person, but property. So that is the second topic. We are now shifting in the Parsha from the injured party being a person to the injured party now being someone's property. Take a look at Pasuk Lamed Zayin. Ki gnov ish shor oseh utuvacho o mechoro chamisha bakar, right? If somebody steals another person's ox or sheep and he shechs it or he sells it, this is the punishment. So again, it's a person who's the perpetrator, but the victim is a person's property. What is being injured, what is being damaged is property. So we're in the topic of property. And that continues through Parachaf Beis Pasuk Gimel, chapter 22, verse 3. I'm on page 413 in the Steinsaltz and page 426 in the Art Scroll. So the last pasuk in this category of a person's property being damaged is that if a person steals somebody else's property, they pay kefel, they pay double. Okay, starting from verse 4 now, again, looking at it from the perspective of what or who is being damaged, let's see what new topic we have here in pasuk Dalet. Ki yaver ish sadeh o cherem v'shilachas biro u'bi'er b'stei acher meto sadeh o meto karmo yishalem. If a man grazes an animal in a field or a vineyard and dispatched his animal intentionally or unintentionally, and it grazes in another's field, he shall pay the best of his field and the best of his vineyard. So now we see very clearly who is the victim or what is being damaged. It's a field. Now that's also property, like the last topic, but it's not the same kind of property. You could say that that was movable property, and this is land, which is unmovable property. But I think we'll see that it's not about whether it's movable or not. It's more about produce. If a person's produce is I don't want to say injured, attacked, damaged. Person's produce is damaged. So look at the next pasuk hey. Right, ki seitze eish umatza kotzi v'nechal gadish o hakama o asadeh shalem yishalem hamavir es habe'era. If a fire spreads and encounters thorns or a grain pile or standing grain or a field. So again, this is a person's produce. And then if we go a little bit further, so we find that the next topic is a person's kesef okelim, right? His money or his objects. Pasuk vav ki tein ish areu kesef okelim lishmor v'gunav mibeis eishim yotzei haganav yishalem shayim im lo yotzei haganav v'nikrav bal habayis, and so on and so forth. So when it comes to damages, so the next topic is kesef and kelim. That I would describe as more movable property. Okay, so let's sum up what we have here until now. That takes us through pasuk ches. We have what Rabbi Samet identifies as four topics, 4 areas of Mishpatim that deal with 4 different types of damaged parties. The first group was if a person is damaged. The second group was if their animals were damaged. The third is if their produce was damaged. And the fourth is their movable property, like kesef okelim, right? Vessels or money. And what Rabbi Samet suggests is that you have here a hierarchy or a taxonomy of things that are important in a person's life, in daily life, right? So people are at the top, right? Mishpatim starts with laws that affect people who are damaged, people who are attacked or injured in some way, right? People at the top of that hierarchy. Next is a person's animals. Animals are living creatures. They're property, but they're living creatures, and so they have a certain level of importance. Under that is produce, what we eat, what we sustain ourselves from. That also has a certain level of importance. And the next is a person's objects, their movable objects, their money, their vessels, their dishes, all sorts of other things. So there's a certain hierarchy there, right? People at the top, and then animals, and then produce, and then movable objects. And so what Rabbi Samet argues, based on this organization, is that there are values implicit in the organization of these laws. That Parsha's Mishpatim presents these laws in a way that conveys certain lessons, very obvious lessons, very intuitive lessons. Number one, the sanctity of humanity, that everyone is created in the image of God, and because people are created in the image of God, they are entitled to be treated a certain way, and they are at the top of the list. they are presented first because they are at the top of the, I don't want to call it the food chain, but they're in terms of our hierarchy of values, they go first. But underneath this, what Rabbi Samit notes and others as well is the following. And this is really fascinating. And instead of just giving you the bottom line first, I just want to show you something. So we saw, we asked before why we started with Avadim, the Eved Ivri, the Hebrew servant. I want to show you a couple other places where the servant is mentioned in Parshas Mishpatim. Servants are mentioned, throughout the Torah in different places. Here in Parshas Bahar, later on in Sefer Dvarim. But what's interesting is that one would think that if Mishpatim was really that organized, then all of the laws of Avadim, of servants, would be in the same place. But you'll see very quickly that they're not. Turn back with me, please, to chapter 21, Perek Chaf Aleph, Pasuk Chaf. Pasuk Chaf. That puts you on page 407 in the Steinsaltz and page 420 in the Art Scroll. V'chi yakeh ish es avdo o es amaso v'shevet umeis tachas yado nakom yinakem. Right? If a person strikes their servant, their manservant or their maidservant with a staff, and they die, nakom yinakem. Right? So vengeance shall be taken. That person should be avenged, meaning that it's a capital punishment. You killed a person. Even though it's a servant, you killed a person. But if the person lives, if he survives, then he's not liable to the he's not liable as a capital crime. Next, skip to Pasuk Chavav, verse 26. All right, because what does it say? If a person strikes their servant's eye and destroys it, knocks out their eye, the servant goes free. If they knock out their tooth, they should also in that case, they are entitled to be set free. Okay, now let's jump a few psukim and go to Pasuk Lamed Beis. All right, in Pasuk Lamed Beis, what does it say? 32. Im eved yigach o hashor o ama. If when the ox is the one doing the injuring, the goring, right? If it injures an eved, a servant, so there's a certain monetary compensation that must be made, and the shor is stoned to death. Now, all three of these cases of damages, we know from Chazal, are referring to an Eved Kanani, talking about a non-Jewish servant, and again, the laws of the non-Jewish servant are different in some ways than an Eved Ivri, and I'm not going to get into all the details of the non-Jewish servant, but I just want to note the fact that we had to jump from pasuk to pasuk. They were not all in the same place, and one could ask, why aren't the laws of the Eved Kanani, these three different laws that we found in Parshas Mishpatim, why aren't they all grouped together? Wouldn't that be more organized? And so Rabbi Samit and others observe that by virtue of the fact that you see that the Eved Kanani is not grouped by itself, means that the Eved Kanani is being treated like a human being. And that the Eved Kanani is not classified as property, right? Remember, in our hierarchy, in our taxonomy, you had people, then you had people who are damaged, animals who are damaged, produce who's damaged, and then money or movable property, right? So there is no category of Eved separate from people. Avadim are people too, according to this presentation of Parshas Mishpatim. Right? Remember, it's arranged. Everything's being arranged by the injured party, And so what you see very clearly is that the values of the sanctity of human life that are presented by the organization of Parsha Mishpatim apply to servants as well, both the Eved Ivri and the Eved Kanani. And this, many have pointed out, is a radical departure from the culture in which the Torah was given. That in the ancient Near East, slaves were property, slaves were a chattel, to use a provocative term, and that slaves could be treated like property. And what the Torah is doing here in Parsha Mishpatim represents a significant departure from that prevailing attitude towards certain human lives, and reordering or recentering appropriate values and respect for human life, and granting more protections to servants. So to go back to our moral question from before, why doesn't the Torah just get rid of slavery? Why does, after just taking the Jewish people out of slavery, why introduce a concept of slavery? Why not get rid of it completely? So some take the perspective that the Torah is conceding to a natural human reality, that there are some people who are more vulnerable than other people, that you have people who are powerful and you have people who are less powerful, and that cannot be avoided. It can only be, but it can be elevated, right? That the Torah can put certain protections in to safeguard the sanctity of human life when you have this imbalance of power, where you have powerful people and people who lack power and therefore are easily taken advantage of, and that is expressed in the concept of servitude. We can take it even a little bit further, and the Ramban makes this observation. The Ramban says that part of the organization of Parsha Mishpatim actually is based on the Aseres Hadibros, the 10 Commandments. That just like he makes the association that just like the Aseres Hadibros begins with Anochi Hashem Elokecha Asher Hotzeisicha Me'eretz Mitzrayim Mibeis Avadim, I'm Lord your God who took you out of Egypt, who took you out of the house of slavery. So Parsha Mishpatim begins in similar fashion by discussing Beis Avadim. Now, what does that mean? What that means is, if the first of the Aseres Hadibros is the belief in Hashem, but the belief in Hashem who redeemed us from Egypt, who took us out of slavery, so the first mitzvah of Eved Ivri captures the essence of that mitzvah, or captures the essence of that idea that Hashem redeemed us from slavery by saying what? That no one can really be enslaved. That the Eved Ivri works for 6 years and he goes out in the 7th year. And that him going out in the 7th year is similar conceptually to redemption, to Yetzias Mitzrayim. That just like Hashem took the Jewish people out of Mitzrayim, Hashem guarantees that anybody who winds up in servitude also gets the Yetzias Mitzrayim, also experiences their own redemption. And the fact that it's 6 years and on the 7th year they go free, the Ramban notes, is clearly a hint to the way that Hashem ordered the world. That the world was created in 6 days. There are 6 days of work. And then the 7th day you go free. The 7th day you're free from your work. It's Shabbos. So just like Hashem created the world in that way, Hashem affords the Jewish servant the very same experience, that they work for 6 and they have a Shabbos, they go free in the 7th, just like Shemitah. Shemitah also, you work for 6 years and then you have a Shabbos at the end. And the same thing with the Yovel cycle. You have 7 cycles, and then you have a 50th year. But what this is teaching us, though, is that again, based on this connection that the Ramban makes, is that Hashem was very mindful, as it were, of the notion that the Jewish people were just taken out of slavery, and now they're being given laws of slavery. But if we look at these laws, what these laws are trying to do is to provide some relief, provide some redemption to the person who finds themselves in a difficult situation akin to slavery. You know, if we look deeper in Chazal, we know that the way a Hebrew servant and even a non-Jewish servant is treated has to be with a great deal of dignity and respect, and that there are many things that are afforded to these servants. I'm not saying it's Disneyland, but there are many things that are afforded to the servant that clearly indicates that the experience of the servant is not like being a slave in Egypt. It's much better. Again, it's not Disneyland, but it's clearly substantively different than the experience in Mitzrayim, the experience of slavery in the ancient Near East. And so what the Torah is essentially doing is recognizing a certain social reality, that there are strong and there are weak, and the Torah provides protection. The Torah provides responsibilities to the powerful of how they're supposed to treat those people who are disadvantaged, and so therefore it conveys these lessons. Again, what are the lessons? That human dignity is primary. That everyone is created in the image of God, and so therefore people go first in the hierarchy of injured parties, and that the servant is not property. The servant is a person. The servant is a human being. It needs to be treated as such. Again, I don't want to engage in too much apologetics to say that everything that's said here about a servant would resonate with modern Western sensibilities. There are certain things that might not when you look at the halachos of how servants can be treated and what damages are paid. Again, there's certain things that definitely don't align with Western sensibilities. Nevertheless, you still find a very clear indication of the values that the Torah is trying to convey. So, even without finding midrashim, we saw just from the plain structure, just from the presentation of these psukim, that the Torah is conveying these values and addressing those questions that we began with, the questions of why begin with Eved Ivri, and why maintain this concept of servitude overall. Okay, any questions on this? Okay, all right, we'll stop here. Everybody should have a great day. Thank you for joining. It was great to see you all, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you, Rabbi.